If you struggle staying in your deep squat, or your heels are coming up off the ground, or your deep squat simply doesn't feel good, then this video is for you. Stay tuned. Yo, this is Grant with smoov, and in this video, my buddy Nate and I are gonna be breaking down 4 tips so you can own your deep squat. Nate, why don't you share what you're all about?
Yeah, I'm Nate Smith. I'm a natural movement coach. I've been doing this kind of work for over a decade, fascial therapy, strength and conditioning. Yeah, I'm stoked to be in a video with Grant and teaching you guys some stuff because I'm really passionate about this.
And if you haven't already, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the smoov channel for more fitness and lifestyle content. Before we get rolling on those 4 tips, I do want to address a question that I get a ton, and that is, what should I be doing with my foot position in my squat? Now, there's a bunch of different things that you could do. It doesn't really matter because ultimately we want to be training options, but here's what I'd recommend. Shoulder width apart, hip width apart. You could go a little bit wider. And then the angle of the feet, I would say angling out a little bit is a nice place to start, especially if you're limited with mobility in your squat. If we angle out a little too much here, we could potentially start to collapse through the knee and the ankle. And we want to make sure that we are strong in these positions, not collapsing and losing leverage. The big key with foot position is just being able to make sure that you can drive through those 3 points, that big toe pad, outer pad of the foot, and then the heel, which leads to the next question I get. What happens if my heels come off the ground? And this deep squat position, people want to get their heels to the ground, but if you don't quite have that mobility, it is totally fine to drop down into this squat and come onto the ball of your foot. Really making sure that we're driving through the ball of the foot and not getting too much into gripping through the toes. So again, we have some leverage in our squat, and eventually over time, as you get more and more active in your squat, you'll be able to settle back into those heels. So tip number 1, elevate your heels while training your squat. By elevating the heels, you're instantly gonna give yourself more ankle mobility. It's gonna allow you to sink back into that squat, into the hips, into the knees, and get used to that active position. Some people will say that this is cheating your squat. I really find it to be a beneficial way to own the squat and get into the depth of your joints. I'm using a couple of 5-pound dumbbells, but you can also use books or just a carpet to elevate the heels a little bit. And this is something that's gonna allow you to own this position almost immediately. You can load the squat with a kettlebell or some dumbbells as you go through the heel elevated squat. As this position starts to feel more comfortable, you can start to reduce the level of height on the lift of your heel, and eventually you'll be able to do it without anything underneath your heels. Tip number 2, practice your active range. A lot of us can get into that deep squat, but we're not really able to actively own this position. So what I recommend is getting active through those 3 lower limb joints. We got our hips, we got our knees, and we've got our ankles. So I want to feel a sense of pulling myself to the ground, and the way I can achieve this is a slight squeeze of my feet together, or even thinking of dragging my heels back. So when I do that, I'm able to visualize and sense a pull through my hamstrings to deepen the knee joint. I'm driving back into my hips, feeling an active hip crease here, and now I'm driving through my feet to create some more space through the ankle. And if this is all I've got, that's totally fine. You can hang out here and own that active range. And you're probably gonna feel some activity through the hip. You're probably gonna feel some of that hamstring activity. You should, and then also some stuff around the foot and the ankle. And this ultimately is gonna allow you to pull yourself down into this position. Wanna focus on creating force through the ground. So when I'm in this position, I'm driving through the foot, and I'm feeling this right up at the hip crease. Driving up, and now I'm a lot more connected to that squat pattern and position. The big key is to use that ground force to create more leverage in your squat. So that could be a spread that's gonna help me get some activity through the hips, and then also potentially the hamstrings. I like that squeeze, I like that drag back, but any of this stuff is gonna get you more active in your squat. So again, I'm pulling myself to the ground, and I'm able to own this actively, and this is gonna be some work. So own it and practice it often.
All right guys, tip number 3 is the split squat. And we're gonna take a couple principles from the first 2 tips that Grant gave us, and we're going to apply them to this cowboy stance or staggered squat. Now, he talked about owning your active range and not being afraid to let the heel come up. So both those things apply here. What we're gonna have is some stretch happening through the quad. We wanna think about getting as much of our thigh on the back of the calf as possible. And then in this front leg, you can see my heel's flat. So this is that half squat position. And I can kind of lean into that leg, into that space. So we can spread this out, driving into it, and really sitting down. I think a lot of the benefit of this position comes from this coverage, this full coverage of thigh to calf. Tip number 4, also taking some principles and some cues from the previous 3 tips, is this figure 4 position. So figure 4 being here, but we're gonna be upright in this figure 4. And so what this affords us is being able to really press into this front leg, adding load with our chest, maybe even eventually grabbing a kettlebell or something to load it down. So we're getting hip, knee, ankle, all of this in flexion together, but we're just doing one side at a time, freeing up this side. It affords us more range of motion. So we can transition, getting into the other side. And then you can elongate this figure 4. You can go active with this sort of upright hip position, or keep it here, stretching forward and adding in a reach or something like this. I find this immensely helpful with a lot of my clients who are struggling with their deep squat, and I get them into this figure 4 range. Okay guys, this is a little bonus tip using leverage to create the squat position for you. So what's really useful is using any kind of door frame or actual door itself. The handles on the door, I'll grab them on either side. I have this nice metal ladder right here. And what you can do first is do this hip hinge pattern. You can create a lot of tension and length through the hamstrings. That's its own nice stretch. But then from there, I have some high leverage. I'm gonna pull my hips down and then open back through them. Even if your heels are up, that's fine. But typically you'll be able to get the heels down because you have this high leverage point. So opening up and then create some low leverage. And again, pull the hips in. Maybe we heel toe, walk inward, pull ourselves upright, and trying to remove some of that tension. See if you're still gonna fall back. I use the leverage piece a lot with clients and in my own practice, just as a nice opener or warm up.
There you have it, 4 tips to help you own your deep squat. Nate, how often should people be doing this practice?
Yeah, man, ideally every day if you can. I mean, that took Grant and I like 30 minutes to run through a bunch of that stuff, and if you even have 10 of those minutes to spare as a dedicated practice daily, that's great. I mean, otherwise, yeah, just as often as you can. This is pretty low impact on your body, and the more the better.
All these tips integrate really well with any exercise program, so you can put these in your warm up, in your cool down. You can also use those tips while you're squatting under load, and how to create leverage, how to create more connection throughout that squat.
Thanks for having me, dude.
Thanks for being here. Those were some awesome tips. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the smoov channel, and we'll be back with more. Stay smooth.
Peace.